Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling. Welcome to another video where today we are covering the grandmaster of the librarians for the Dark Angels, sorry, that's Ezekiel. Now he is a very long-standing character in 40k lore. He's been around for a long time, as you can tell by his very old model, which is way overdue for an update. Anyways, let's get into it. So Ezekiel comes in at 75 points, which is about the same as his contemporary Asmodai. He has actually pretty much the exact same stat line, though he does have a 2+ save, where Asmodai only has a 3+ for some reason. Aside from that, he has movement 6, toughness 4, 2+ save, 4+ invulnerable save, 4 wounds, leadership 6+, and OC 1. A very standard sort of medium character profile. In terms of ranged weapons, he has his mastercrafted bolt pistol, the Deliverer, which is pistol and precision at 12-inch range. It has one attack that hits on 2s at strength 4, AP 1, and damage 2. Pretty solid at splatting a light infantry or two. Or, no, splatting a light infantry. It's only got one attack after all. And then his main ranged weapon is his Mind Wipe Psychic Power, which has devastating wounds, precision, psychic at 12-inch range with one attack that hits on 2s, strength 4, AP 2, and damage D6. Very standard, if not very good at sniping characters. And also strength 6, not strength 4. Not sure where I got that. Of course, with precision and devastating wounds, it's very solid at sniping out lighter characters and is a threat to pretty much every character in the game, with the exception of, I believe, Custodes' Terminator Shield Captains. Of course, you'd have to roll a 6 to kill them, but, you know, they're still able to be sniped out by this. And you can upgrade it to gain anti-character 4+, which is definitely worth it against characters that are above toughness 6. And I think the hazardous test is more than worth the trade-off, even though, you know, it does run the risk of nearly killing Ezekiel. It's just nice to have because it will also allow you to really punch up against something like a Chaos Knight, which this guy is surprisingly threatening against, as D6 devastating wounds is obviously very nasty. He does, of course, have to be very close to the enemy to do this, but of course his melee is not too bad and is quite exceptional for a librarian, though isn't too standout aside from that. He carries the Trader's Bane, which is anti-chaos 2+. It's a psychic weapon, with 4 attacks that hit on 2s at strength 6, AP 2, and damage D3, one of the few remaining D3 weapons outside of grenade launchers. This is a very interesting melee profile, very good at killing most kinds of marines and similar sort of enemies. Though, of course, its D3 damage is rather swingy, which means it could struggle to kill even a single Space Marine. This does have something to do with his buffs, but I do wish it had 5 attacks instead of 4, which in a way it does, but it would have been nice if it had it baseline. In terms of abilities, he has 3. He has his Psychic Hood, which of course gives you and your unit a 4+ Feel No Pain against psychic attacks. He has Engulfing Fear, which in the shooting phase you select one enemy unit within 18 inches and they take a Battle Shock test. Fairly ho-hum, as most Battle Shock things are. In terms of his Book of Salvation, which he has strapped to his side, this is where most of his power comes in. While he's leading a unit, you add one of the attacks characteristics of weapons that the models are equipped with, and also, if he dies, all friendly units within 6 inches must test Battle Shock, which is not ideal, but it isn't really the end of the world. After all, the buff is very powerful. Adding an attack is one of the most powerful abilities you can have in terms of buffing melee units. Now, let's get into how I would use him. Overall, I'd say Ezekiel is more so an interesting collection of ideas, rather than something so straightforward as just slamming Azrael into the enemy and letting him generate CP while he chops up the enemy. You'll have to think a bit more using Ezekiel than you will most other characters to make the most of his buffs, but that's not to say his buffs are bad, they're just more indirect. In terms of his basic buff, which is just +1 attack, that is as simple as it gets. Put him with some Inner Circle companions, they'll be even deadlier than they already are. Jumping out of an impulsor, very solid idea if you really just want to chop things up. And his own sword can come into play into something I'll talk about in a minute. Let's focus on his shooting first. His Mind Wipe is genuinely threatening. To things like Imperial Guard characters, it's basically instant death, and to medium characters, it poses a real threat. Of course, with the hazardous tests, it could prove to be, it could bite you back, but it is also useful. And as I mentioned, since it's anti-character, if you're fighting Chaos Knights, for example, which we'll get into more in a minute, you can simply snipe at them and pretty consistently just deal D6 mortal wounds to them, which is really something a knight doesn't want hitting through them, as it mostly bypasses their toughness. His sword, the Trader's Bane, has anti-chaos 2+, which is entirely matchup dependent, but if you're fighting demons, any of the stripes of Heretic Marines, or Chaos Knights, it will come into play quite consistently. It makes him quite threatening to Chaos Knights, actually, because they can't really rely on anything. Their saves are only okay in melee. He has good AP, which gets through that, and they can't rely on their toughness, which means he's pretty much going to always just be dealing 5d3 damage to Knights, which is an odd visual, but it does make him probably the best Dark Angels character for punching up, with maybe some Samael flavored exceptions in there. I'd say, though, on the contrary, from his really good sword and his good melee buffs, his leadership skills are pretty mediocre. The Feel No Pain against Psychic is once again matchup dependent, though in those matchups it will be very impactful, but his Battle Shock test isn't that useful, mainly for the fact that it's in the shooting phase within 18 inches. Doesn't even mean you'll be able to charge them, so you can't necessarily rely on it to counteract counteroffensive. And these guys don't really get anything off of fighting battle shocked opponents, which means it's sort of just kind of whatever. And there's a very good chance they'll go back to full health, or they'll be destroyed by the end of the turn. It's mostly a pointless rule. And if he does get sniped out, that could lose you some victory points by battle shocking some units, which could flip some objectives, which is ironic because he's such a good sniper, but he's also a great sniping target himself. If there's a Vindicare on the other side of the board, there's few targets as valuable as this guy could really throw a wrench in your plans. But if he's off operating on his own with some Inner Circle companions, that isn't the biggest problem. And even then, it's sort of a what-if, because not everyone runs snipers, and most snipers are going to struggle to kill a well-armored Space Marine, and also, they have to get through whatever other defensive mechanics you might have, whether it be the Inner Circle's -1 to Companion, -1 to Wound from the Inner Circle Task Force, Feel No Pain, whatever it is. But that is a point to look at. So in general, I'd say Ezekiel, not Asmodai. Ezekiel is behind Asmodai, and definitely behind Azrael, but I think he is strong enough to justify himself if you want him and a bunch of Inner Circle companions that don't already have a character like Asmodai, a Chaplain, or Azrael attached. This guy, with some Inner Circle companions jumping out of a Impulsor, would be quite deadly to whatever they get into combat with the exception of things like Knights or Land Raiders. Of course, if they're Chaos Knights, though, Ezekiel, D6 mortal wounds in the shooting phase, then, 5d3 mortal wounds in the fight phase could not quite kill a knight, but pretty much bring it to its knees, and then the lethal hits from the Inner Circle companions could very well bring it down for the rest of it. I think that's totally fine. If Chaos Knights ever get rampant, come knocking to Ezekiel, because if you're Chaos, he is going to chop through you with scary efficiency. And while his damage could be swingy, he could in theory only do 6 damage, he could of course also do 21 damage to a Chaos Knight. That's the nature of random damage results. Overall, I think Ezekiel will be better in the hands of more veteran players, as he's a little bit more, you have to have a purpose to use him rather than just he makes your army stronger in general. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.